One of the most important steps in preparing a D&D campaign is establishing player and DM expectations. D&D can be a big time commitment for all parties, and to invest time, effort, and passion into a project, only to have it wiped away due to conflicting interests, is frustrating and can often lead to undesirable outcomes. Now, for your cringe entertainment, here's some RPG horror stories for you to enjoy. In the background, I've prepared some master rank teamfight tactics gameplay to satiate our human desire for bright colors and stimulus. Now, without further ado, here's our first story from Reddit user Salada Warrior. Post titled, "I signed up for a gritty medieval RPG. Instead, I got dragons, destiny, and a DM with a weird obsession." So this was a while ago, but I still think about it every time someone says, quote, "My game is low fantasy," end quote. Let this be a warning to anyone who's ever been tricked into a fantasy setting by a DM with an agenda. I love tabletop role-playing games, and was really looking forward to a no-fantasy, gritty world to play. No elves, no wizards, no magical bloodlines. A cruel and painfully grounded. Think mud-rusted swords and dying of a chest cold in a pigsty. So when a guy I met online, let's call him Mark, pitched a campaign called Ashes of the Iron Realm, promising no magic, no fantasy races, and absolutely no chosen one crap, I was 100% in. I made a female hedge knight with the average generic tragic backstory of having her village burned down by northern raiders, and she vowed to protect innocence, and I made a personal objective of making a better living for the common folk and innocents. She almost always donates most of her money to build an orphanage for the village kids that lost their parents. Mark was intense, but in that way GMs sometimes are. He kept messaging me outside of group chats to say things like, quote, "Your character concept is so unique. I've never met a player with your depth before," end quote. Which was odd, but I brushed it off. He said he liked how I, quote, "understood suffering," end quote, which should have been a red flag, but I was excited to play. Anyway, the campaign starts. Everyone makes broken, gritty characters. A disgraced sellsword, a plague doctor that sounded insane, a peasant girl who burned her village down. Real bleak stuff. We're loving it. Session 1's great. It's all political tension, hunger, plague, angry mobs, perfect. Session 2. We meet a hermit who speaks in riddles and has a third eye. Mark says it's just old superstition. Okay, weird, but I let it go. Session 3. Sellsword finds a sword wrapped in red vines that sings when drawn. I point out that it sounds magical. Mark insists, quote, "It's just metallurgy and ancient craftsmanship. People back then believed anything," end quote. Sure, whatever. By session 5, things are getting blatant. Plague Doctor gets marked by a dream stag. An NPC heals someone by touching their chest and whispering in a forgotten tongue. A tree starts bleeding. I'm squinting at the screen like, is this a fever dream? So I message Mark privately. Hey, I thought this was supposed to be a no magic setting. He replies, quote, "This isn't magic, this is a mythic truth. There's a difference. You of all people should understand that," end quote. What? He follows up with, quote, "There's just something about the way you write your character. It's like you're meant for deeper things. Most players, they make little dolls, but your character feels real, like something old and sacred, something fertile," end quote. I actually had to reread that last word because I thought I misread it. I hadn't. The weird vibes escalate from there. Every session, Mark gives me special visions, glimpses of a woman giving birth, or whispers from the forgotten goddess of fertility beneath the world. My character becomes the only one who can see, quote, "the true nature of things," end quote. I ask him to tone it down, and he says, quote, "I just think your character is more open to the mythical world. Maybe because of who's playing her," end quote. Excuse me? It all comes to a head in session 7, when the party visits a ruined abbey and meets an ancient cult leader named Severin the Hollowed Eye. This guy starts ranting about the bloodline of iron and womb of the stars, and then just straight up says to my character, quote, "You must lie with me, vessel of rebirth. The child we make shall be the chosen one," end quote. Silence. I literally shouted in the call, "What the fuck did he just say?" Mark responds with, quote, "It's part of the prophecy. He's an old man, he's not serious. He just believes he's destined to sire the hero," end quote. I responded, "Yeah, that's worse." One of the other players DM'd me after saying, quote, "Hey, that was uncomfortable. Are you okay?" End quote. That's when I realized I wasn't overreacting. I left the campaign right after that session. Mark messaged me saying I was, quote, "abandoning the sacred arc, that my player had a responsibility to the story," end quote. He even wrote a paragraph-long bit of lore about how the bloodline is now broken and the world will suffer. Good. Let the world burn. I just wanted to play a miserable knight who dies a tragic death while trying to make the world a better place. End post. This next story comes to us from Reddit user La Fleur Savage Gaming. Post titled, "Paladin goes off on druid for casting firewall to kill gnolls." Roll post. Online D&D game, I am playing a wildfire druid. Lots of fire, lots of healing, ashes to allies. He is from a small nestled city deep in the woods, and grew up in the monastery of the local forest goddess. You know, standard fantasy fare. She acts like a priest of a nature goddess and steward of the natural cycle of the forest. Paladin throughout the game. Why isn't she wearing armor and wild shaping? You're playing a druid, not a wizard. You shouldn't be casting all those spells. Your character shouldn't care about what's in books, they're made of trees. You should hate libraries. Why does your character have a home in the city? She should live in the wild. End quote. Then today, we were surrounded by gnolls, our backs against a ravine wall, and I waited until the last second, an upcast firewall and an arc completely surrounding us, and straight through the middle of the gnolls. It was a glorious moment of a druid pulling some serious druid shit, further enhanced by her wildfire perks. The gnolls were fucked. The ones that didn't burn to death the second it was cast ran off, and were then murdered by scorching rays and arrows from our archer before they got out of range. The annoying player had gone down 3 times in the fight because he didn't pay attention to the cleric when he told not to break sanctuary until the cleric could drop rain heal on him. The second time, he got picked up as collateral damage from a mass healing word. And the third time, we were not going to bother because he was just going to do something stupid, getting himself killed again. He was angry at me because, quote, "Firewall is a defensive spell. It has wall in its name. You should have used that spell slot to cast heal on me so I could have fought them. I'm the paladin," end quote. He then went on to lecture me, quote, "Druids are about area control and not killing, blah blah blah," end quote. I finally just snapped. Shut the fuck up, you tool. If they are so cooked that savages who like well-done steaks are showing up because they smell charcoal, the area is controlled, you goddamn tool. He then blocked me on Discord after that, and is apparently asking the DM to kick me from the game right now for using fuck and calling him a tool. As I wrote this, and just before I went to click post, the DM announced that Paladin has quit the game. End post. This next post comes to us from Reddit user Action A Go Go Baby. Post titled, "Had a stereotypical neckbeard DM and stupid players punish me for playing Raptor Jesus in the session I wasn't even there for." Roll post. We were supposed to be playing an Oriental theme campaign. Yes, that's the word the DM used, and asked everyone to make characters that would fit that style. The DM was the kind of dude who lived and breathed anime, had body pillows, unashamedly talked IRL about his waifu tier list, etc. You get the idea. This was before the internet was seriously picking up enough to allow people to play online, so local was all we had and games were sparse. I decided I wanted to make a sort of mystic/old wise man vibe, but I'd also wanted to try a Dragonborn character. So I ran it by him and he liked the idea of my character looking a bit like one of those dragons from Japanese lore/myth with a beard. Great, right? Sorted. Officially a Dragonborn cleric, but you get the idea. Anyway, the game starts and someone at the table, I can't remember who, but it doesn't really matter, says, quote, "Oh, you're playing a cleric and a Dragonborn? That's like that Raptor Jesus meme, right? Is that why you're playing Raptor Jesus? Because of a meme?" End quote. I stare at him blankly as, to be honest, that was a super weird leap for anyone to make, but eventually I said, no, that was not the inspiration at all. However, I noticed the DM giving me a weird look, but paid no mind. The whole table started joking about how my character, Raptor Jesus, was definitely that meme and how funny that was that the DM let it slide in a serious campaign. So I'm away for the second session because of family issues, come back to session 3 and get told before I even sit back down or say hello, roll a new character. I'm seriously confused, obviously, so I ask what the DM is talking about. He goes on to explain that I, quote, tricked him into allowing a meme character at the table, that he expected better of me, end quote, and how it was only appropriate that my character got crushed to death by an avalanche, that the rest of them miraculously survived. I asked again what the hell he was talking about, but the DM just said, roll a new character or leave, and no memes this time, don't fuck with my setting, end quote. So I left. End of post. This next post comes to us from Reddit user CommercialTie2196. Post titled, DM Punishes Lateness. Roll post. This one is still fresh since it happened like an hour ago. So my DM has always been a bit snappy, but today a player was late because their internet provider was having an outage, and his data wasn't good enough to let him join. He let everyone know about this. That should have been the end of it, but no. We're playing the game, getting into it, and this guy finally joins. For context, we were mid-boss fight. At first there was no issue, but then this player, who's pretty new to D&D, asks if he should roll initiative. The DM replies no. When asked why, the DM said the player will go after the boss, dead last, because the DM said so. That already gave off red flags, but when the player pointed out that his class feature literally lets him roll initiative with advantage, something he was excited to use, since he's never reached this level before, the DM said, and I quote, "Okay, you can, but you'll roll the next 3 rounds with disadvantage on all attack rolls," end quote. Naturally, the player asked why. The DM responded with, quote, "Are you the DM or am I? Do you want a DM?" End quote, in a very patronizing tone. But he didn't stop there, oh no. At a certain point, the player grew reasonably annoyed with all the patronizing and insults. Apparently, just asking questions about certain rulings was annoying and interrupting the session. The post advertising this game was tagged as noob-friendly, by the way, just to clarify why the player was asking so much. And all the other players were totally fine with the so-called interrupting. After the player eventually returned, after calming down, the DM told him, quote, "Actually, you roll with disadvantage on everything for the rest of the session," end quote. At that point, he promptly left the game. He's now trying to get in touch with the DM to ask why he acted this way, and so are we as fellow players, but no one has been able to reach him, end quote. This next story comes to us from Reddit user IllegalAvocado2975. Post titled, "Killed just before the session-long BBEG fight in a cutscene." Roll post. The title is the TLDR version. This is an older story that someone's commented in another post reminded me of. The quotes are not actual quotes, but approximate from what I can remember from the conversations. Back around the early 2000s, I was in a long-term campaign. We had just gotten into the BBEG fight, and the DM straight out killed my character in a cutscene. No saving throws, no chances to defend myself, just dead. I asked the DM why, and he said that it was supposed to inspire the rest of the party to fight harder. Now what? And he replied that I was just going to have to wait. Wait for what? I asked. Can I pull out one of my spare characters? He said that I couldn't since it would be too contrived to drop in a character in the middle of a boss battle. So what am I supposed to do now? I asked, and he replied, you're just going to have to wait until the battle is over. So just before we get into combat with the boss, you kill me and I'm supposed to do what? Sit back and shut up and watch the battle. The DM nods. I started packing my stuff and get ready to leave. The DM is not happy with this decision. We go back and forth for a bit, and eventually and grudgingly tells me that there's a scroll of resurrection in the treasure or after the fight. I said, why bother? This is the end of the campaign. You said it yourself, once this guy's dead, you're stepping down, and Jeff, one of the other players, was going to start his campaign, so bringing me back after it's all over does nothing. I left at that point. Didn't play again until several months later when there was an LFP notice at the game store. End post. So not to break immersion or anything, but I do have some thoughts about this. As a DM, if you ever have an opportunity to do something cool, but it requires removing a player from the campaign or from the session for a bit, the easiest thing to do is to just ask the player beforehand. I've been a DM and I've come up with these cool plots about a player character getting kidnapped, but it would require them to be away from the session or not doing very much for maybe half a session or even a full session. So you talk to the player, you figure out if there's a way to make the experience easier for them, find a compromise that's fun for everyone, and if that's not possible, scrap the idea. It comes to us from Reddit user Kai Lee Lady. Post titled, DM demands I wear costumes, drink in real life potions, and don't play male characters. Roll post. This isn't that crazy, but here's my entry. So I live abroad in Taiwan, and a couple of years ago, I was trying to find a game to play in, as I really had the itch to play D&D, because I hadn't since I lived in the States. I posted on a foreigners group asking if anyone was interested in playing, and I got some interest from this guy who said he and his girlfriend were going to start up a game and it would be her first time. I was kind of excited about the idea that there would be another woman in the group, because I had bad experiences abroad with all guy groups. He had pitched it to me as roleplay heavy and kind of relaxed because he didn't want to scare his girlfriend away. He said it would be chill. That, unfortunately, turned out to not be the case. The group chat is where it really started to go bad. It wasn't anything insane, but the guy was just really incessant. I already hate group chats, and this guy was messaging at all hours of the night and getting kind of upset if we didn't message him back quickly. No big deal though, I know DMing is a lot of work, and probably he was anxious to get stuff set up. We were going to play Lost Mines of Phandelver, which I thought would be good because it was an opener module, and he said his girlfriend was new. After a while of setting up the game, he started to lay out some rules that were definitely not chill. For example, one of the things he said was that we needed to all be in costume because his girlfriend really liked the idea of dressing up, but didn't want to feel like the odd one. I fucking love doing weird bits with costumes. It's actually one of my favorite things to do, but I just got a bad vibe that he told us that we had to do it. Because I also can't guarantee that I'm going to have a costume every single time, considering I was going to have to ride public transit to get to his house. He also was going to make potions, and whenever we drink a potion or any consumable, we were actually going to have to drink his alcoholic beverage that he would put in these potion bottles. Again, a really cool idea and concept if it comes up organically. I just find it weird that it's like, no, you have to drink my vodka shots every time you want healing or any other potion. The final thing that really got me was that I had created a male character and my husband had created a female character, because why not? He all of a sudden started asking lots of questions about us and making sure that this wasn't some kind of kink thing, which it absolutely was not. I just wanted to play a male character and I thought it was weird that was the first thing he jumped to. On top of this, he kept interrogating me and telling me that he didn't think that I, as a woman, could do a convincing male voice, and that it would probably break immersion for his girlfriend. He kept underlining and bolding the fact that this was a roleplay heavy campaign, and that he expected me to roleplay with a voice, and he demanded voice notes where I did male voices. I just kind of ignored this because I know I could do it, and this isn't a job. I assured him I've been roleplaying for a long time and I was in theater and he shouldn't worry. I will bring the roleplay. He just really wouldn't give up on this point, and I was not going to do this, so I just kind of stopped responding after a bit. That's when he went absolutely nuclear, sending like 30 messages about how he'd spent like 1,300 USD on sets and costume pieces and modular terrain, and I was like, I didn't ask for all that. It's not my problem. Anyway, I blocked him and decided to start my own campaign as a first-time DM. Been going on almost 2 years now, and it's been the best decision I've ever made. So, happy ending all in all. End post. This next story comes to us from Reddit user Full Throttle Halfling. Post titled, Setting Expectations and Opening Communications Are the Bread and Butter of D&D. Roll post. Excuse the length and grammar. I'm typing this the day after a pretty downer session. This story is more sad than horrific because it happened within a close group of friends who have no real-life animosity towards each other. However, there are key issues I've only come to recognize in hindsight, things that should have been addressed earlier to prevent a player from making a rash decision based on a huge misunderstanding. That player ended up removing herself from both the friend group and everything she had in the game. I was invited to a Strixhaven campaign by a player I knew from a couple short-lived campaigns, unrelated to the issue. We'll call her Bard. From my experience with Bard, she's a well-meaning person who wants to make sure every player and DM can use whatever tools or sources they like to enhance the game. For example, she introduced me to Tasha's Cauldron of Everything when I was looking for subclass ideas or feat combinations that suited my character. I also really valued our time outside the table. We shared similar viewpoints and often traded stories and rants. Bard is extroverted, funny, and hype, someone whose presence is genuinely appreciated by everyone at the table. Although most of the campaign ended up revolving around Bard's character, bordering on what some might call main character syndrome, none of us, including me, were really bothered. Bard even apologized a few sessions in, acknowledging that her character was dominating the spotlight and that she tended to instigate plot developments without always including the party. I thought, after several reassurances, that we weren't upset about the imbalance and that she understood. Some people just enjoy being part of the story even if they're not the center of it. In fact, I messaged the DM privately to say that I wasn't comfortable with my character being forced into a chosen one role. I prefer to play my characters as part of a team, not for wish fulfillment. A few sessions later, we lost a player due to real-life obligations, and Bard invited someone new. It was obvious they knew each other well. Within moments of joining the Discord, Bard and this new player were joking around and bantering comfortably. We'll call him Warlock. Warlock, like Bard, is charismatic and social out of game, but he played a very uptight, entitled character in-game. Despite the contrast, he always made it clear, especially after sessions, that there were no hard feelings from him as a player. Even when Warlock became the butt of jokes, he laughed harder than anyone. So, with everyone seemingly on the same page, I assumed things would be fine. In hindsight, I should have spoken up when I noticed a familiar pattern. The session. The party was exploring their first dungeon. Bard roleplayed her character in a way that made the rest of the party grow more distrustful of her. It was approaching PvP territory. Out of character, we all knew Bard's character was a sleeper agent for a shady cult that opposed us, the students of Strixhaven. Our party had been sent to retrieve powerful artifacts for the school, one of which was a dragon orb that we now had in our possession. But none of us felt personally betrayed. In fact, we were intrigued by the story development. When we regrouped with Bard's character, she revealed her ties to the cult. While our characters responded with understandable disappointment and anger, we as players still wanted to support her, and yes, that included Warlock's character. Despite the justified in-game tension, we tried to maintain the party's cohesion. After a combat encounter with some shadow monsters, the DM introduced an NPC who resembled a cult member in another room. Bard immediately chased after them, even as the party pleaded with her to stay together. This was a reoccurring habit of her character, running after powerful NPCs. She had a one-on-one interaction with the cult NPC, failed a wisdom saving throw, and was overtaken by shadowy forces. Now under the cult's control, Bard seemed to enjoy the turn of events. He's always been the kind of player who leans into the drama when things go wrong. When she returned to the party, possessed, we rolled initiative. Warlock went first. He entered his genie vessel and fled the combat zone, taking the dragon orb with him. Bard pursued. For some reason, her possessed form granted her several buffs and the ability to make bonus action attacks. I raised an eyebrow. I'd been in another campaign where a similarly overpowered PC, loaded with magic items and even an army, initiated PvP. That situation ended in a TVK and one player leaving mid-combat. It soured the whole campaign. Back to Strixhaven, I doubted the DM had made Bard strong enough to wipe the whole party, but the concern lingered. Eventually, we destroyed the NPC and freed Bard from possession. While we, the players, knew what happened, our characters didn't. Since the possession occurred out of sight, when she ran off, everyone, especially Warlock's character, assumed she had intentionally tried to kill him. This was the final straw for Warlock. In character, he called her a monster, specifically referencing her possessed, shadowy form, and then walked off. At that point, we took a break. Out of character, Warlock felt awful. He, the DM, and Bard had previously discussed how the group dynamic was starting to fray, and they'd intended for this arc to repair the trust, not break it further. Warlock even considered retiring his character because the tension between him and Bard had become irreparable. Bard didn't take it well. She left the Discord call immediately. She returned briefly to apologize for playing her character as she had, and said she felt bad that a newer player felt pressured to switch characters because of her. We reassured her that it wasn't her fault and that we didn't want her to feel bad for role-playing. I don't remember the exact order of events. It was very late, but Bard eventually left the call again. This time, she also left the server and deleted her character sheet. That's when we found out Bard's character was a self-insert, and the shadowy darkness within her was a metaphor for personal struggles she was dealing with in real life. Because she poured so much of herself into the character, in-game interactions became deeply personal. When Warlock's character called her a monster, it triggered past trauma. The line between her character and herself had blurred too much. The rest of us were playing characters far removed from our real selves, so her reaction came as a shock. The DM also felt partially responsible. We had tried to orchestrate a dramatic scene hoping it would end in reconciliation, but it spiraled into something much worse. We decided to put the campaign on hold until we figure out how to proceed. There's no bad guy here per se, but there are lessons to take from this. There were signs something was brewing, but we didn't speak up because it didn't seem to threaten our friendships until it did. No matter how close your friend group is, you have to be transparent and set expectations up front. Everyone should understand what kind of experience we're aiming for together, and if something seems like it might become a problem, we should speak up and work it out together. TLDR, a player created a self-insert character and in-game interactions became too personal. When her character was called a monster, it triggered real trauma. She left the game, the server, and the friend group entirely, leaving the rest of us confused, shocked, and concerned. End post. This next story comes to us from Reddit user AbjectFlatworm5792. Post titled, "The DM Pitched Us Different Games." Roll post. This happened 6 years ago, so some of the details are a bit hazy. As stressful as the situation was, everyone, as far as I'm aware, has moved past it and forgiven each other. A total of 10 players were involved. Yes, 10, plus one DM. The DM really wanted to do something big with all of his D&D friends. He was about to move to a different country to start grad school and wanted one last in-person game as his send-off. We're from a big city where D&D is plentiful. It's practically growing off of the trees on the sidewalks. Everyone loved this DM. He'd already run at least 2 campaigns in our community and frequently hosted one-shots at a local game store. So he had his pick of players, all with vastly different playstyles. He wanted to include all his close friends, but didn't know how. So he designed a one-shot that he hoped would appeal to everyone. Think a cross between Battle Royales and Indiana Jones. Essentially, we were traversing a lost underground city to entertain the gods, and whoever found the final artifact would ascend to godhood. Remember, this was a one-shot. He had massive plans, giant puzzles, roleplay, returning NPCs, eventual PvP, the whole gamut, all built for 10 players. His first mistake was assuming all of that could fit into a single session. But again, he was very beloved in the community, so we all trusted him. We all showed up for the big night. The game store he usually ran one-shots at kindly let us use their space. We had to pay for it, obviously, but it gave us far more room than someone's house. We were all happy to pitch in since the DM was so well loved. Most of us were vaguely familiar with each other, though some hadn't met. I only really knew one person, but that's not important. We were given about an hour to introduce our characters, goof around, and get to know each other. Everything was fine. People talked over each other a bit, but that's expected with 10 players. Then we got to the Lost City. It became immediately clear the DM had marketed the one-shot differently to different players. We didn't know it at the time, but apparently he tailored the pitch based on what he thought each player would enjoy. Some were told it would be a heavy min-max PvP slugfest, a fight to the death where the strongest would ascend. Others were told it would be a puzzle-heavy Indiana Jones adventure. Still others were told it would be roleplay focused, with the gods taking pity on underdogs and uplifting them to victory. So while we were all pitched a Lost City Indiana Jones Battle Royale concept, we were all pitched it very differently. This culminated in a heavily min-maxed barbarian absolutely wailing on a roleplay focused bard, obliterating her within 5 minutes. She actually managed to escape at first before another min-maxer killed her. To make things worse, the DM thought initiative would be too boring for a one-shot. So to make things exciting, he invented a system where everyone wrote down their actions, including who they were targeting. Then he spun a custom-made spinner to determine turn order. Yes, really, and yes, it was kind of cool. The problem, it nullified any reactive or response-based abilities like counterspell, shield, etc., which put every spellcaster at a huge disadvantage. It also made combat insufferable. You don't realize how much you depend on knowing your turn order until you lose it. So fights broke out over things like whether a paladin could still hit someone that a wizard had just banished because the paladin had already written down their action. Did they still get to act, or did they forfeit their turn? The first round took a literal hour. Instead of a randomized but structured order, we were all basically yelling over each other trying to figure out who was doing what. The arguments were insane. Though again, the spinner was kind of cool. It got scrapped by the end because the DM realized initiative exists for a reason. All in all, 2 people left the game early after their characters were killed. The DM tried to convince them to stay. Apparently he had prepped Beyond the Grave mechanics, where the dead could still participate via traps or act as spectators. But one of them, the bard, was very upset and just wanted to go. The other one, I can't remember their character, was kind of just bored. They had only landed 1 hit before being killed. Barbarian min-maxer eventually eased up after realizing not everyone was playing a competitive PvP game. He lined up for the rest of the session, but the damage was done. I do know he eventually apologized to the bard, and they're actually pretty good friends now. They play Lancer together. The other min-maxer, no idea what he played, never really picked up on the table's vibe and kept assuming everyone was still having fun. The DM eventually dropped a trap on him, like an asteroid from the sky level of trap, because he wouldn't stop targeting roleplayers. That made the min-maxer upset, and I think that's when he finally realized no one else was enjoying it. We never got to any of the puzzles. That sucked, because the DM had built some pretty elaborate ones. 3 major puzzles were never even brought out. One group did eventually find a puzzle about 6 hours in, but it was so convoluted they gave up, and the fighter just smashed through it. My changeling rogue died before seeing a single puzzle or trap. One of the role players did win, but I think it was mostly because the barbarian min-maxer felt guilty. Again, it's kind of a joke in our community now, and everyone has moved on, but it really shows how important honest communication is in these games. The DM had great intentions, celebrating his grad school acceptance with one last in-person game, but because he didn't pitch it honestly, it became the worst D&D experience I've ever had. TLDR, communicate honestly with your players. And we can all laugh about it now, so John, if you're reading this, sorry for exposing you. End post. That's all the stories I have for today. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope that it helped you in some way. Maybe as entertainment, or perhaps as a cold shower regarding your own or somebody else's behavior. Regardless, I hope this incredibly niche blend of teamfight tactics and RPG horror stories was helpful for you in some way. Have a wonderful night and stay safe.